Okay, welcome to my video. This is part 3 of 3 parts. It may go to a 4th part, I'm not sure. We'll see. I might want to add some colour to the foreground foliage. I think this is certainly it for the trees. Anyway, for those who are interested, the colours that I'm using here to put the highlights on these trees is cinnabar green and light green. Pretty well straight from the tube. I haven't added anything else. The whole painting is actually quite a limited palette. I think there's only 4 or 5 colours that I've used. So I'm not going to do too much to this. I was going to work on the sky, but I've decided I quite like the sky as it is, so I'll probably leave that. And as you can see here, I'm just tickling away, putting in these highlights. The dark underside of these trees is dry, so there's no risk of the paint mixing and turning into mud. And if you watch parts 1 and 2, you'll understand why I do this. In other words, I do all my drawing, all my painting in a mixture of sap green and red oxide, or transparent oxide red, depending on what I feel like. You could use cadmium red, of course. And then I let it dry with all these different textures in it. So, in fact, if you look at those trees in the background there, in the middle background, just above where my brush is, you'll see that they look distant because they're slightly misty. And this effect is not achieved by adding anything to the paint. It's still sap green with a bit of this red oxide in it, but I painted more thinly. And I wiped back so that the white of the board underneath showed through. So here we are trying to get a bit of texture on the foreground. If you want, well, everybody wants this, so they want to get perspective in a painting. And one of the best ways to do it, even if you're doing an impressionistic or tonalistic painting, is to have a little bit of detail in the foreground, because obviously when things are closer to you, you see more going on. So that's really what I'm trying to do here. And again, just adding a few highlights to these, this sort of hedge. And now we go to the middle part of the painting, which I found a little bit boring. So I've decided to do something to the trees, get a few more shapes in there, make them a bit taller. And I'll be adding a few highlights to them as well. I'm also using this technique because the sky is dry behind what I'm doing, and when I drag the brush sideways, I take paint off the surface, and what's behind it, in other words the sky, shows through, and it gives the illusion of a little bit of light on a field in the distance. So rather than get bogged down trying to mix up these colours, there you go, that little bit there is a good example of wiping away colour to give that illusion. And I turn the brush on its edge to get taller trees and thinner trees, and then turn it back so that the broad side of the brush is contacting the painting for larger areas. So as I've probably said before, if you think you see detail in any of my paintings, it's purely an illusion. So this is the left-hand side of the painting now. These trees are quite dark, and in fact they probably would look dark against a sky that is that light. However, I've decided to put in a few highlights on the front edge of these trees. Just to give it a bit more dimension. One of the dangers when you're doing things like this, when you're painting trees like this, is to make the tree light as it contacts the sky. And if you look out your window now, or wherever you are, if you can see some trees, when you look at a tree, even though it may be a pale green, next to a light sky, it will look dark. It's the contrast. It's the way our eye handles that, the transition. This is the right over on the extreme left. I found these trees a little bit boring, so I'm just going to spruce them up a bit. I'll leave you to watch for a while. Gladly, in fact, because the painting is the easy bit. The hard bit is all this talking at the end. I've often thought painting is one of those things that you learn best by watching rather than listening to, unless you're making disastrous mistakes on a picture. You do learn more by watching, and you can see what I'm doing, obviously. The way I use the brush for trees like this is as haphazardly as possible. What you don't want are symmetrical, round, sort of, if you understand what I mean, step and repeat. You don't want to do 3 identical trees in a row, unless that is the character of the trees that you're looking at. Like particularly here in France, you get plantations of trees all lined up, and that can make an interesting painting in itself. But for this sort of thing, I'm trying to keep them as random as possible. Now we're back to the cinnabar green here, and a little bit of light green added. And what I'm doing now is just building up a little bit of contrast in the foreground to pull the eye forward, and a little bit at the back there because, well, the eye finds that exciting, which I'm sure you can see. It starts to get a bit of twinkle. You may notice as I paint that I don't stay in one area too long. I dart about as much as possible. That means that I don't overwork one particular area. And if you can get your desired effect quickly, your painting will have it'll have a certain freshness to it. So gradually working down into the foreground here. And as usual, I'm doing the commentary after the painting, so I forget where I got to. I'm sure any second now I'm going to be working on the foreground. Here we go. You don't have to paint every blade of grass or every weed that pokes its head up. Just give the impression. Just state enough of what's going on without overdoing it. This bit goes on quite long here, so I may speed up the video just for the last minute or so that it's all over in seconds, and you'll see what I mean. And here we are back to normal speed. So in this bit, I'm not sort of too concerned with blades of grass. It's more like sort of clumps of weeds and stuff, foliage, that sort of thing. And where are we now? Yes, okay, so, and here I'm just trying to put in the impression of a few sort of distant small trees or hedges that are catching the light just below the horizon. I hope you feel that you're learning something from these videos. Please feel free to comment as much as possible in the comments box below. Even hard criticism, I can take that. I've been a commercial artist for so many years now, it has no effect on me, so I won't be offended. Anything you'd like me to do, let me know and I'll consider it. And here's the final picture. And if you like my video, please share it, spread the word. And if you're feeling generous, as it says here, please visit my Patreon page. Thanks for watching. Bye.